Friends, tonight we're building the T-26 from Hobby Boss because I like to suffer. I also had these metal tracks waiting for it in the stash, and a set of Voyager photo-etched blink, and if you think that's a lot of brass, then you're totally right. Let's start with the assembly, shall we? It's a small tank, so it should go all pretty smoothly, unless it won't. Well, to be fair, some of these tasks are not necessary and it's just my OCD kicking in, but I found all of these panel lines rather shallow, so I decided to do a little bit of scribing with the opposite end of a hobby blade. One thing I immediately noticed is how the main parts of the kit have these 45-degree angles. The theory is that there should be no visible gaps once you glue them properly, but I see them as an opportunity to add even more panel lines. This can be achieved by scraping the material away or sanding the sharp edges with the file. This way, I'll achieve nice gaps which will be easily filled with weld beads. But it also means that the gluing job must be super clean, and in these situations, I prefer super glue which won't melt the plastic. It's also easy to make sure each plate sits at a right angle and everything will fit together. I also knew that there was some additional sanding down the road, so I removed these rivets. Just a small hole with a hobby blade to mark the position, and we're done for now. I don't want to make it look like this entire build was about scribing, but that's what had to be done during these initial steps. As I said, these weld grooves have to be nice, clean and deep. And it's also quite satisfying in a weird way. Finally, I did some brutal sanding on the side because the superstructure was slightly wider than the hull. Other than that, the model was pretty much ready for the fun stuff. You might be wondering what's going on with the turret. And I'll just tell you that I had the entire build filmed, but my SD card decided to give up and I lost all the footage. All I can show you from the build are these phone shots from my Patreon, very smooth plug, and it was a chore to say the least. I was expecting that the kit would be nice, not Tamiya level of fineness, but passable and enjoyable. But this reminded me of the old Zvezda kit that I built as a teenager. Not great, my friends. Anyway, let's get to the fun stuff. And what's the definition of fun? Texturing. That's right, even though this is a tiny little tank, I couldn't resist a little bit of armor texture. If you apply it subtly, it won't be even noticeable, but it'll greatly enhance your painting experience and the final result. But then I noticed something else, and that required even more rivet removal. Because, you see, if I already removed a bunch of rivets on one of the plates, why not remove and replace all of them? The root of the issue was around this transmission cover, where the kit did some weird geometric gymnastics, and I had to fill the whole thing with Tamiya putty. Once I sanded it flush with the armor plate, I could add a brand spanking new panel line that looks just like on the real tank and makes the entire model look, well, logical, And while I was at it, I also removed the plastic hinges because destroying models is my new definition of fun. The whole surface is now flat as a board, just how I like it. So let's now replace those missing rivets. The technique is super easy because all you need is the opposite end of a drill bit, in this case 0.7mm, a sheet of pewter foil, and a piece of rubber. You use that drill bit as a die and just punch out rivets into the rubber. Super quick and cheap. Now, admittedly, these metal rivets are a bit flat, and you'd need a nice half circle for realistic rivets, but hey, they still look better than the kit ones, even if they're still not ideal. I like this method a lot because it feels so liberating. Riveted tanks don't have to be intimidating anymore, so if you need to do some brutal filling and sanding, you don't have to worry about those plastic rivets anymore. Okay, rivets are one way when you need to connect armor plates together, but what about the other type? Weld beads. When it comes to these, I always grab my favorite Tamiya epoxy putty quick type and I roll it into thin worms between two pieces of plastic. And in case of this tank, they had to be really thin. These might be the finest welds I had to ever make in 1/35th scale. Luckily, the grooves make the application very easy, and any excess putty can be sliced away with a blade or simply rubbed off with a toothpick. I hear that sometimes people have problems with the putty and it doesn't want to adhere to the surface on their models. I think the key is to apply it while it's fresh, and you have to make sure it's dry, otherwise the water will create a barrier between it and the model. Another issue I often hear about is that it's impossible to add nice weld texture. Here I like to leave the putty for a while so it can solidify a little. When it's fresh and soft, it's a real nightmare, even for me. So usually I apply as many welds as I can all over the model, and once the putty isn't adhering to the model anymore, I start texturing. Then it's just about keeping the texture tool wet and you're good to go. Oh yeah, I always talk about water, but here's my dirty secret. I just lick my tools. Much quicker and also more effective. If you want a detailed tool licking tutorial from me, you'll probably have to join my OnlyFans because I'm not gonna share that for free. Anyway, I mean, who would think that we could have so much fun with weld beads on a pre-war Soviet light tank, right? But it definitely looks the part, and as a bonus, they have a nice subtle texture. Now that we have the tank bolted and welded together, it's finally time for the fun stuff. Photo etch, and even better, fenders. I was looking forward to them because I wondered how they fit to the model, and if anything went wrong, I still had the plastic ones, which are also pretty nice. I hear that many of you find these metal mudguards, and especially their soldering, to be intimidating. And I totally hear you. I was in the same boat until I tried it a few times, and the truth is, there's not much to it. You definitely need a bending tool because the bends have to be precise. Of course, flat pliers are also handy for those funny shapes, especially curved surfaces. But as long as you follow the side part, you can't get it wrong. The tool will also hold them steady while you're soldering. There are just two rules here that I follow. Always solder from the lower side because it's gonna be covered in mud and also kept out of sight, and use plenty of soldering fluid. The rest is, well, the job pretty much finishes itself. Solder can be also applied on the outside as putty. All those small yet ugly gaps between parts easily removed in seconds, and once you sand them down, the results are going to be squeaky perfect. A small trick that I started using not so long ago is adding some mounting braces to the inner side of the mudguard. If you glue them flat onto the model, they can be really fragile, but with these, you connect them to the model just like the original plastic parts, and you can easily grab the finished model by them without breaking anything. As a bonus, they will also help with alignment, so everything fits perfectly and quickly from the beginning. Then it's just about securing them with super glue, and here I like to be quite generous. The excess can be wiped away with debonder, hidden with more diluted Tamiya putty, or just left there because all of this will be covered with tracks and dirt anyway. Additional pieces such as these braces can be soldered in place before you attach the fenders to the model, but I like to fix them with super glue after the fenders are in place. Sometimes the fender can be slightly bent and all of a sudden these parts won't fit, so this way you're giving yourself a bit of leeway. Here it's definitely a good idea to be generous with super glue, again, and absolutely necessary to remove the excess with debonder. So there we go, and it wasn't even that hard, right? I've got some more photo etch work for you, but first, we haven't talked about merch for a while, and guess what? These subtle designs are back in stock, but what's even better, we have brand spanking new design with my own logo. Each one is awesome, sure, but they're specific. I, for example, wear this one as a part of my basic mall outfit, and the second one, I'll definitely wear that to model shows. Merch sales help me pay for my social and health insurance, so each purchase goes a very long way. I'll leave you a link to the Plastic Invasion store down below. Thank you. Okay, what else do we have here? Well, there's a lot of photo etch on this model, but trust me when I say that it's all done in the same way as the fenders. I just didn't use as much soldering for it. What I want to talk about are these working hinges, which seem like a total nightmare, but once you clamp them into the bending tool and get the hang of the process, they're just so fun to work with. I'd say that plastic hinges, if done correctly, are easier to paint, especially when it comes to pin washes, but these just add so much delicacy to the model and it's really hard to resist them. What isn't fun at all is making these very specific grab handles. You know, the ones that are bolted to the hatches. But then I had to bend them outside and do it at the correct height. Then I had to trim the excess, although this is where things are getting easier, and finally flatten the ends with pliers. It's a really cool detail though, not gonna lie. And just as I'm writing these sentences, I just got a nifty idea. I think these could be 3D modeled in different sizes and dimensions and just printed in excellent quality. Maybe one day, when I stop being a lazy bum. Alright, now we're getting to the running gear, and this is the part of every tank that I find therapeutic. Well, not this time. The alignment of those tiny road wheels was pretty much impossible for some reason, and it didn't end there. The only saving grace for this suspension was this cool modification I had to do. You see, the clamp on the bogies is hollow in real life, but it's molded shut here. In fact, it's welded shut on museum tanks as well. What I'm trying to say is that I again had an excuse to use a large AC drill on my model. The sad thing is, with the T-26 being one of my all-time favorite tanks with extreme childhood nostalgia, I'd like to build more of them in the future. I have the 81 in the stash, but with the running gear being so unpleasant, I can imagine having these parts 3D printed for future projects. Oh, and yeah, I'm keeping the wheels removable for painting, just to make it more fun. The kit also gives you working plastic tracks, but I don't like working with them, and I heard some terrifying horror stories from others about these specific ones. So I was really glad that I had a set of reels ready for it. Well, I actually had to steal them from my 81, but still, I had them and they're good. It was totally different than working with those massive E100 tracks from a few weeks ago. I also upgraded my wire chopping setup, but don't worry, I'm only using the furthest end of the blade, so the rest can remain sharp for those precise cuts on plastic pieces. So yeah, the tracks are nice and they hold the flimsy running gear together. I can't wait to have this area painted and weathered so I can superglue it and align everything perfectly. Let's now exploit the modern 3D printing technology from the future. And what I have here is a 3D interior for the standard T-26 turret, which I bought on Coles 3D. I'll leave you a link down below. The turret on my model is conical, but I'll try to fit everything in place. Now, the reason for this upgrade is because I wanted to keep both hatches open, and I didn't want to risk an empty void inside the turret. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but a few months ago I replaced my old Photon Mono SE with Elegoo Saturn 4 Ultra, and combined with this high detail resin from 3D Jake, it's a pleasure to work with. I'll be definitely exploiting this technology from the future more in my upcoming projects. Now that I decided to open the hatches, I had to deal with this obnoxiously ugly gunner's hatch. It's just a hollow piece of metal on the real tank, but the kit replicated it as this padded hunk of steel or something. My chiseling skills are not perfect, and the result ain't perfect either. But I swear it's at least 100 times prettier than what was originally in the kit. Just check out how lively the turret already looks. Of course, I'll have to paint the interior in striking white colors so we can actually see something. Speaking of seeing something, I also bought this rather new figure from Alpine. The figure is beautiful as always. There was just this little kink on his right shoulder, but everything else was exquisite. The problem is, his hands don't fit on the turret because he was obviously designed for a bigger tank. This is one of those moments when I hate myself for not being brave enough in modifying my figures, because then even a simple surgery like this gives me goosebumps and the results are not ideal to say the least. And even then, his left arm was still not touching the hatch ring properly, so the only solution was adding a small tarp. This actually serves two purposes, because the figure is designed for a hatch, which means he has no legs, and his lack of lower limbs was painfully visible through the gunner's hatch. So it kinda serves both purposes. Anyway, my friends, my mission is over for now. This video is slightly shorter because I wanted to give you 2 videos this month as an apology for February, and also because I can't wait to start painting this thing. As I said, T-26 in winter camouflage has a strong sentimental value to me, because when I was 12, my first real exposure to World War II armor was a Ukrainian strategy game called Blitzkrieg. Of course, I chose the Soviet campaign and the very first mission was Mannerheim Line in Finland. I had 3 T-26 tanks, there was snow everywhere, and I had hot chocolate and biscuits on my desk. Okay, the last part is probably a false memory, but it adds to the appeal. As such, I'd really like to build more variants of this tank, especially the Leningrad abominations that were built and modified under the German siege. But I don't know. Unless Tamiya releases the kit in their benchmark quality, I'll probably stay away from it. I'll have barely enough motivation to build the 81 tank destroyer that sits in my stash, and well, I don't know, one day. As I said, I also built the Zvezda kit when I was a teenager, and you'll find it on my personal website, so check that out as well. Okay, the full painting and weathering video will probably take a bit longer than this, but I want to do it properly and old school again. Well, I guess we'll see about that. But what I'm trying to say is, thank you everyone for watching, I seriously mean it. Because I wouldn't be able to relive my childhood memories and have fun with my hobby and make a living out of it if it wasn't for you. So when I say that I appreciate your time, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you again. All of this is also greatly possible thanks to the help of my amazing patrons. My whole Patreon page is like a Night Shift magazine subscription, as I post there pretty often, and you'll get updates from my workbench where I share my thoughts and insights. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm posting 1 week early ad-free videos and those stay there forever, so you can always get back to them. I also have some extra goodies such as 3D models which you can use for detailing your projects, a bunch of real-life references for nature, old buildings and so on, and last but not least these high-resolution studio photos which show the model in more detail than video ever could. It would help me a lot, but no pressure. It's appreciated but not expected. Anyway, you might have noticed that the tank in my reference image has a large bundle of sticks on the engine deck, and that was the main reason I went for that specific vehicle. But as I was nearing the end of the build, I started to enjoy the triangular silhouette of the tank, and I didn't want to ruin it with excessive baggage. We'll see once I paint it, but the finished model will most likely be in the same configuration as now. Anyway, I'll get to it, and you better keep building those models, don't just collect them. Okay? Cool. Cheers!